C, Command V, copy, paste. Quote, whenever any government shall be made inadequate or contrary to these purposes, a majority of the community have an indubitable, unalienable, community, that's you, by the way, right, an indefeasible right to reform, alter, or abolish it. Sound familiar? It's in the Declaration. Jefferson got it from Mason. In such manner as shall be judged most conducive to the public weal. Jefferson's Declaration text was only slightly different, but read, but when train along abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, offenses are designed to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new safeguards for their future security. Now, you can't blame Jefferson for being inspired by Mason, because Jefferson, like many of his day, lionized Mason with hero. I mean, imagine guys trading baseball cards. They would have been trading George Mason cards. Back to Mason and the problems he had with the Constitution. In the margins of his copy, which his daughter discovered, Kate Mason Rowland, wrote a book about it, in the margins of his copy, next to the citation for Article 5, he wrote, quote, Article 5, by this article, Congress only has the power of proposing amendments at any future time to this Constitution, and should it prove ever so oppressive, the whole people of America can't make or even propose alterations to it. A doctrine utterly subversive of the fundamental principles of the rights and liberties of the people. In all, Mason recorded objections he had to 17 clauses or articles of the Constitution. These concerns led him to refuse to sign the document, wouldn't sign it, did not, still to this day, there's no evidence that Mason ever acquiesced, even after Virginia ratified, still, never. Refused to sign the Constitution, and these concerns led him, after that, to voice his objections in the next day's session. So he went home that night, got his pen out, and started writing. He wrote all night long. When the convention reconvened the next day, Mason began lodging his complaints, clause by clause, biding his time until debate got busy, marking up Article 5 while we're here today. Before Mason could stand yet again this day and oppose the current language of Article 5, he would have to wait until his friend, Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts, which, by the way, and I told somebody this earlier, the term gerrymandering, first of all, it's inaccurate. Second of all, it's mispronounced. It would be gerrymandering because it's Elbridge Gerry who they named it for, and it should be called Henrymandering because it was Patrick Henry's idea. Because Patrick Henry was trying to stop little Jimmy Madison from getting elected to the first Congress, so he Henrymandered Madison's district in the Virginia legislature, but Madison still won. Keep that on your head. From James Madison's notes, this is what transpires. What Madison wrote about what happened on that day. Mr. Sherman expresses fears that 3/4 of the states might be brought to do things fatal to particular states, as abolishing them altogether or depriving them of their equality in the Senate. He thought it reasonable that the the proviso in favor of the states importing slaves should be extended so as to provide that no state should be affected in its internal police or deprived of its equality in the Senate. Colonel Mason thought the plan of amending the Constitution exceptional and dangerous, as the proposing of amendments is in both the modes to depend in the first immediately and in the second ultimately on Congress. No amendments of the proper kind would ever be obtained by the people if the government should become oppressive, as he verily believed would be the case. Can you say NSA? If there's a more oppressive form of government on this planet that is currently in operation, I, for one, would like to see it, because it would make me feel good. Oh, that's a relief. We don't have so bad after all. Of course, James Madison, being James Madison, he couldn't imagine that the majestic federal government, which he was designing, wouldn't be up to any task that was thrown its way, like maybe amending, so the idea of a central bank could be done away with. I don't know, something crazy like that. Madison's notes continue, quote, Mr. Gouverneur Morris and Mr. Gerry moved to amend the article so as to require a convention on application of the states. Mr. Madison, and Madison didn't tell us which ones, but of the states, Madison did not see why Congress would not be as much bound to propose amendments applied for by 2/3 of the states as to call a convention on the like application. In other words, why would you think our angels in Congress wouldn't propose to slice some of their own power off by proposing an amendment? Notice in the Constitution, the only extensions of power saved for, the only recursions of power saved for the 13th Amendment are extensions of power. 13 is the only one that actually says, okay, you can't do this. Stopping you from doing something you shouldn't be doing. All the rest of them are, we'd like to, can't buy any booze. How about that? Of course, the states had to ratify this, and this is why this process is so flawed, and remains flawed to this day, but we need to fix that. Madison didn't see any objection, however, for providing a convention for the purpose of amendments, maybe, though, except only that difficulties might arise as to the form, the quorum, which in constitutional regulations ought to be as much as possible avoided. The motion of Mr. Governor Morris and Mr. Gary was agreed to, nem cum. That's Latin for nemina contradicata. That means without objection. Meaning that there is no objection. Now, imagine if today's Congress and committees could agree unanimously on anything. I've seen one resolution that was nearly unanimous, and Ron Paul was the only one who voted against it. He should have. It was a resolution or an act to confer these medals of freedom on people. And Ron Paul said, show me in the Constitution where we award medals. As a matter of fact, it says we don't award titles of nobility. So he voted against it. It passed 434 to 1. So I've never seen a unanimous vote. Have you? Even the Iraq War resolution, the authorization to use military force on September the 20th, 2001. There was Barbara Lee, I think, a congressman from Texas, that voted against it. It wasn't unanimous. But Madison thought that, oh, they'll agree on everything. We're angels. These were the last words spoken by Colonel Mason during the convention, other than rising to announce that he would not affix his signature to what he viewed as a flawed document, written in secret, without the knowledge of the people or the political bodies that had called for the amendment convention to be held to begin with. Mason was not alone in this concern, because in late August, before the just described events, Mason, Elbridge Gary, and delegates from Georgia, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, South Carolina, and Maryland's Luther Martin, the old reliable drunk, had met outside the convention, probably at a bar, privately to try and rein in the very work they were participating in. Dude, Luther Martin is just one of my favorite founders. I could spend the rest of the hour talking about Luther Martin, but we won't go there. Great book by Bill Kaufman called Drunken Prophet. Founding Father, Drunken Prophet. Get it. Martin said that the meeting's, quote, sole work was not to aggrandize the great at the expense of the small, but to protect and to preserve, that's kind of conservative to me, if possible, the existence and essential rights of all the states, and the liberty and freedom of their citizens. What a novel concept, liberty and freedom of citizens. What is this guy? He must have lived in the 18th century or something. The work of these men in the Great Convention did preserve much of those rights, but as we know today, not nearly enough to prevent the fake Federalists who returned nationalists into beginning the 234-year-long project to transform the Constitution from what the great M.E. Bradford called a nomocratic instrument into what it is today, a teleocratic cudgel that can and is used to give sanction to all things for all people. And the difference between teleocratic and nomocratic, again, too difficult to explain in a short amount of time. Basically, nomocratic means you run a small government that does very few limited things, and it can't solve everybody's problem. It won't even try to solve anybody's problem. Won't try to feed anybody, won't try to clothe anybody or anything like that. Teleocratic does everything, like what we have today. Perhaps this is why the one vestige of Mason's et al.'s work, the amended Article 5 of the Constitution, remains never having been used by the principal objects of its amended form, sovereign people of the states. The Constitution is to ever regain the initiative in the great battle to reestablish its original form or plan of being a plan of government for the states that enter into a compact with not equal but superior powers that will be necessary for the states, as you heard earlier, to call an Article 5 convention and enter into the labor which must be applied to repair the damage and prevent new usurpations, if indeed that is possible. As Bill said, that is not an option, my friends. That is your call of duty. This is something that time will not permit of any more delay, and it won't permit of any more delays, because how many more NSAs can you create? What will the next one do? Will it actually move in next to all of us? Hang on, you got a new neighbor moving in. Oh, it's the Smiths. No, he works for the government. Yeah, he's going to be kind of keeping an eye on you guys and making sure you come over once a day. So we have to transmit the phone records, because of Rand Paul, we can't do that anymore. So, what is to be done? Article 5 provides an avenue. It's not perfect. And no, somebody out there right now, I can hear you, is thinking like, we're going to runaway convention. What about a runaway NSA? What about a runaway CIA? What about a standing army that's in 207 countries around the world? What about that? What do you propose to do about that? What about $18 trillion in unfunded liabilities or direct debt and $222 trillion in unfunded liability? What do you propose to do about that problem? Mister, we can't have a convention? So, I suggest to you today, and I've concluded part 1, you have 3 options at your disposal. You have Article 5, you have nullification, interposition, and you have secession. No one wants to talk about the S word because, Lincoln made that illegal, didn't he? You can't do that. People say, you can't nullify anything either. That's not in the Constitution. Exactly. That's right. That's why there's Amendment number 10. It says if it's not in there, it's a reserved power. So, I want to spend a little bit of the next part of the talk talking a little bit about how you can approach all 3 of those things, and what the most important part about that is that you must know. And once you know this, and once you get this, I promise you, my friends, you will become the biggest evangelist for all 3 of those things the world has ever seen. You'll have bumper stickers on your cars. You'll change your Facebook pictures. You'll change your Facebook avatars. Your Twitter feeds will all change. Once you grasp the concept of state. What is a state? What do you think a state is? Somebody heckle me. What's a state? Country. Good. Country. It's a good start. Not what I was looking for, but that's good. Good. Excellent. Kat, what's a state?
State is a legal authority over a territory.
Okay. Good start. Good start. What's a person? Ooh, it's really interesting now. What's a person? Living, sentient being. The doe one of you shot this year, or the 10-point buck in the Georgia hinterlands, it's not a person, it's an animal. It's an animal conscience. The only thing it knows to do is find food and mate. That's not sentience. That's instinct. What's a person? Persons can reason. Persons can think. Persons have conscience. Some should have guilty consciences, but they don't. Thank you, Mom. What's a person? So a person is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ came down here as a person. God made him through our Virgin Mother Mary into a person. He walked the earth. That was a person. The people that walked the earth with him, they were persons. This is very important to understand this. Why does that matter? You're talking gibberish. No, because persons are what make up a state. Here's where the explanation gets really interesting. Gentlemen say common interest. Good. Persons can get together and showing or demonstrating that they have a common interest. They can say, hey, Stan, hey, Mary, hi, Lisa, hey, Ron. We all agree on some things. Let's form a club. What do you want our club to do? Well, our properties all adjoin. Hey, I got an idea. When we go on that big fishing trip next week and all 4 of us leave, we can appoint somebody to guard our property. Yeah, we can appoint somebody to guard our property. Hey, I got it. And if somebody comes on and they shoot him. Yeah. Everybody vote. I'm in. 4 people voted. What did they just do? They formed a state. They formed a government. They are a state. They are an entity. John Taylor of Caroline County said sovereignty is defined by the will to enact and the power to enforce. They had the will to enact, they had the power to enforce. Their property, they were going to appoint the guy, give him the gun, and tell him, look, if somebody comes on this land, you shoot him. That's government. So, why is the first part of the exercise important? Because you're persons. You control your state. Not the other way around. Your legislature, I know we have some legislators here, you guys are agents. You're Jerry Maguire. Not as good looking, but Jerry Maguire. Oh no, there's one good looking guy here. You're Jerry Maguire. What does that mean? You are our agent. Our 4 men again, or 3 men and 1 lady, have just formed that state on that property. That is their government. The man that they appointed to shoot the trespassers is their representative or their senator. Now, while that man is squatting on that property, it's really interesting now, our friends are all fishing, right? He was told to do what? What's his one enumerated power? Shoot the trespasser. Did it say anything in the notes that we left you about raiding the chicken house, killing the chicken, and eating it? No, it didn't. Guess what? We hired somebody to shoot you. They are in control. They enumerated one power. They made that man their agent. He violated their code. And so they enumerated another power for a guy to shoot people that shot trespassers but ate the chicken instead. That's a government. This is how it works, folks. We are the people, the sovereign people. Doesn't matter what the geographical borders are, it's irrelevant. Could be Georgia, North Carolina, could be here, this little county here. Could be 5 counties put together. It's immaterial. Most people are fixated on the state as being your legislature. This is incorrect. Your legislature is a body. You created it. I guarantee you there's a charter for this. As a matter of fact, I know there is. I read it. There is a charter for this state's government. You chartered it. You had a Constitutional Convention in 1776 in September, passed and ratified in October right here in Georgia. That's your government. You created that. King didn't create it. Your ancestor created that. Okay. So then who controls it? Whose government is it? Yours. If it doesn't do what you want it to do, what should you do? You should either form a new one, fire the current one, and form a new one, or if we have common interests, and these people over here have different common interests, this is no big deal. Secede! You guys go that way, we're going to go this way. I want to govern this way, they want to govern that way. Fine. What is the big deal about that? Why is it so hard to grasp? Yet, people would shrink at the idea, we can't break up our political alliances. Lincoln made that illegal. Did he really? So we're at the state level now. We've created our state. We've enumerated some powers to it. Now stuff really gets dicey. There are guys in other places that have done the same thing. They've enumerated some powers. And guess what? Not only did they have a guy that they hired to police the property and shoot trespassers, they now have problems with the same people that were eating the chickens on their property. And not only have they eaten the chickens, they've actually taken the gizzard of the chicken off the property and are now making products out of it. Across state lines this is happening. Well, we need to get together. So, we made a deal. We're going to make a deal with these 13 other little pieces of property here. And we're all going to agree that if we hire a guy to shoot people that trespass us while we're fishing, if the guy eats our chicken and then takes the chicken and the body parts of it goes across a line into another place and shares it with someone else, that's a felony, and we want that stopped. We want that commerce stopping across state lines. So we made a deal. 13 parties got together and agreed, you can't do that. And we will agree, we will extradite chicken gizzard sealer from state A back to state B. Now what have we done? Now we've created a federal government. We created a state government and we created a federal government. And we did what to it? We gave it what? An enumerated power. Very simple. We told you, you are our agent. Any chicken gizzard sealers going to another state, you guys will hire, we are authorizing you to hire someone to bring our gizzards back and to bring that guy back into our jurisdiction. This concept is really simple now, isn't it? So now that you understand the simple concept of why we don't have monarchs or kings, and why we don't have dictators. This is what I just described to you as what is known as republicanism. This is what the founders practiced. This is what that generation after the founders and the one after